What happens when you eventually have to do things that are less stimulating? Can you open a book and read it for half an hour without doing anything else? Many times, this sounds unappealing, difficult, or even boring, so you start indulging in playing video games or watching your favorite series on Netflix, and before you know it, a couple of hours have already passed, so you quickly start to finish your task for tomorrow and stay up late, only to wake up tired the next morning and repeating the cycle. You are probably very aware that these hard activities bring value to your life, and the others are just momentary pleasures, so why do you still gravitate towards them? To understand this, we need to look at a neurotransmitter known as dopamine. Dopamine is about what might, what's going to happen in the future, that's potentiality. It's these abstract ideas about things that don't exist yet, leading us to dopaminergic pleasure and making us feel excited, enthusiastic, and energized. In a study published in 2009 by the Journal of Behavioral Neuroscience, rats were implanted with electrodes and put in a compartment with a single lever. When the rat eventually pulled the lever, they immediately gave a stimulus as a reward to the rat's brain. The rat would pull the lever for hours just to get this reward system, completely addicted and refusing to drink, eat, or even sleep. This demonstrates the danger of too much high dopamine. In a corollary experiment, researchers blocked the reward system of the rats. This made them completely lethargic, unable to even get up to drink water or eat food, only if placed directly next to their mouth, demonstrating the necessity of dopamine. This is why people addicted to something find it so hard to quit and adapt to a normal life. They've used two dopamine levels that are so high that they become like rats who are not motivated to do anything. 1. Dopamine detox. So, is there anything you can do to overcome high dopamine rushes? To help you overcome addictions, you need to perform a dopamine detox. The key is to slowly remove these highly addictive behaviors and do other things. To start off a dopamine detox, pick a day in the week to avoid all the highly stimulating activities. Let your mind be at peace and let it recover from the constant high levels of dopamine. People will go to amazing lengths just to fill up the silence. When was the last time you sat in silence to experience your own thoughts? When you are walking around, in public transport, or in the elevator, your first intention might be to grab your phone and browse your email, messages, and social media, searching for dopamine. So, you need to set a day aside, without your internet, phone, computer, music, and junk food. You can exercise, walk, meditate, write, study, read a book, clean your room, and have a good conversation with your friends or family. I know that this is not easy. You will soon begin to crave the addictive behaviors you've been doing for years, but radical actions lead to radical results. What you need to do is connect more dopamine releases to activities that benefit you, exercising, reading a book, serving as an incentive to give you long-term benefits. Using a high dopamine activity can be added as a reward for completing difficult work. So, track all the low dopamine activities that you do, cleaning your room, reading a book, working, exercising. And after completing them, reward yourself with some high dopamine activity. Say, you're at work and you start browsing social media, playing a mobile game in the break, or constantly checking your text messages. All this stimulates your brain and makes it more difficult to concentrate on your work. You aren't going to feel like doing low dopamine work since you aren't motivated. That is why you should first complete the low dopamine work and then indulge in high dopamine activities. You could do 8 hours of low dopamine and 2 hours of high dopamine. Adapt this to your needs. Always try to not find a behavior that is damaging, such as drinking alcohol, smoking, etc. Instead, play a video game, watch a series, or do anything else you like to do. This system allows you to control your addiction. 2. Combine two habits. Another tip for doing low dopamine activities is associating low dopamine with high dopamine activities. If you love coffee, listening to jazz, or enjoying going out to the park for a breath of fresh air, combine this with another habit that you're trying to work on. You'll start developing a positive association with these habits, making the experience more enjoyable. So, every time you go to the park, listen to jazz, drink some coffee, or do anything else that you enjoy doing, have a good book and begin to read a few pages. Eventually, opening up a book will become more natural and enjoyable. It seems like the issue is that dopamine fasting doesn't literally lower dopamine levels significantly. So doing just anything to lower dopamine isn't going to necessarily help people with their habits. This warning mostly applies to people who hear dopamine fasting and think that they should try to avoid any dopamine-stimulating activity in short spurts for their health. Though, as you said, that may help with mindfulness, it doesn't necessarily have a direct relation with dopamine levels in the body. However, avoiding the compulsive, dopamine flood-triggering activities listed here, like social media and junk food, does, I think, have a relation to dopamine that is more than just about mindfulness. Those addictive activities have behind them powerful neural pathways that couple the activity with the chemical reward, and thus create compulsion. By avoiding them for a day, you are resisting that pathway and in doing so helping to weaken it and build new ones. So I'll grant that dopamine fasting could have misleading connotations, but at least in terms of avoiding compulsive activity, it really does affect the brain's dopamine response directly. So perhaps this post could be reworded a little to keep in mind that it's less about diminishing your net dopamine level and more about diminishing your reliance on dopamine rushes. Dopamine detox can be helpful if done properly, but it has certain limitations. A dopamine detox can change your life. In the brain, dopamine functions as a neurotransmitter. It affects many aspects of your behavior, some of which include learning, motivation, and mood. Your brain is addicted to dopamine, and it will try to stimulate the repetition of the behavior that produced the dopamine hit in the first place. The challenge with this is, once you get what it is that you desire, dopamine turns off. As a result, you end up not feeling as satisfied as you thought you would. In fact, you may feel empty. In turn, you end up craving more and more. This leads to a delusionary cycle whereby you constantly find yourself chasing happiness. This is referred to as the molecule of more because dopamine fuels your desire. Have you ever desired someone in your life? Maybe you met a man or a woman and you obsessed over them so much, to the point that you felt as if you were falling in love. When you have an experience like this, the dopamine levels in your brain skyrocket. Let me give you an example of how dopamine plays out in the context of a relationship. In the beginning stages of dating someone, it can feel like you're high on love. Can you relate? Everything feels so good, otherwise referred to as the honeymoon phase. During the heart-pounding excitement of new love, your brain releases a lot of phenethylamines, which creates that punch-drunk in love kind of feeling. Unfortunately, the effects of P wear off with time, and infatuation tends to fade within 12 to 18 months. When this happens, a lot of relationships end because the excitement is gone. In short, people get too complacent with one another. There are a lot of behavioral patterns that people indulge in that are fueled by dopamine. A simple and powerful example is sugar addiction. Dopamine creates a craving for sugar. When you crave something sweet, you may envision what the sugar will taste like when it hits your mouth. Once you taste the first bite, you may notice that the second bite isn't as satisfying as you thought it would be. People end up repeating this cycle, which creates an addiction to sugar and binge eating. This is the direct result of dopamine overstimulation. Why is this a problem? Anything in moderation is okay. I'm not anti-anything. However, the problem arises when those things become addictive to the point that you overstimulate your dopamine level. When you do this, your baseline level of happiness and joy goes up. At this point, you need more of those dopamine hits in order to feel pleasure. Not surprisingly, it becomes even harder to experience a sense of aliveness. The result is feelings of depression, anxiety, or an overall lack of energy or motivation. Here's where things can get messy. When you stop engaging in addictive behaviors all at once, you may experience withdrawal symptoms. This is a dangerous way to detox your system. This is when it's easy to fall back into destructive patterns of behavior that give you instant gratification. It becomes the only way that you are able to experience happiness. People use dopamine hits as a way to mask negative emotions that they don't want to feel. You can only distract yourself for so long before those emotions rise to the surface and start affecting every area of your life. The solution to all of this is to do a dopamine detox. The best way to reset your mind is to cultivate here and now transmitters. These include serotonin, endorphins, oxytocin, and GABA. These neurotransmitters allow you to enjoy the present moment, experience connection, and be at peace with yourself. They give you lasting fulfillment and joy. You cultivate these here and now neurotransmitters by slowly starting to remove behaviors that are causing issues in your life. Pick one thing that you are addicted to, whether that's video games, pornography, social media, coffee, or sugar. Give your mind a rest and allow your baseline to return to a normal level. Meditation is a powerful way to increase your dopamine levels naturally and reset your brain. It's also been found to rebuild your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that helps with self-control and willpower. If you have an overactive mind, meditation will change your life in that it will bring you back to the present moment, which is all that you have.